Hello and welcome, everybody. Time for Light 'em Up. It's Wednesday evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome back. Welcome back to the lounge. Welcome back to another inspiring and enlightening episode here at the Light 'em Up lounge and program. I'm glad and grateful to have all of you joining us, whether it's here on Zoom via our virtual lounge, or all of you folks joining us over on Facebook for the live stream. Today is a very special show. I'm looking forward to welcoming Jeff Borysiewicz joining us live from Florida, talking to us about his FSG, Florida Sun-Grown Tobacco operations, talking about the Corona Cigar empire that he has built throughout the decades, and everything that's going on in the cigar industry, the state of cigar retail, and of course the tragic news that Jeff recently shared on his social media regarding the devastating hailstorms that hit Florida Sun-Grown and pretty much wiped out this spring's crop entirely. So we will talk about all of that. We'll talk about his role as a steward of the land. And Jeff was already here with us. He's just trying to get to another spot and reconnect to a more stable Wi-Fi there. So in the meantime, we thought we'll go live anyways. We'll spend a bit of time with all of you here, hear how things have been, and hear from the community, from the family, because without you, none of this would be possible. And Light 'em Up is all about you. It's all about the family. So first of all, a warm welcome to all of you. Mace, I'm glad to have you with us, joining me as a bit of a co-host here in the early minutes of the show, and of course your wonderful questions are always much appreciated. But whilst Jeff is joining us and logging on, I wanted to give the word to you and bring you on stage and yeah, just hear how you've been and what's news over in the UK.
I've been really good, really good. Thanks for the warm welcome, Reinhard. I'm always excited about my Wednesday evenings. Everything's already sort of booked out in the calendar, so super excited to be here. And I guess the only news really is I'm not sure if you were on last night. You know, Souters, Lawrence Davies, does his weekly sort of podcast where he sits down with Nick Hammond, and of course Nick was here, part of the family, a few weeks back. And what's interesting is that of course Nick
last week, last week. And he launched his book appeal. And what was interesting about that is that Lawrence has agreed to effectively, for every person who pledges, however much they pledge, he's donating £50 towards the university, towards that university that he's offering. And on top of that, for any person who pledges, apparently they also get a cigar in Souters in London. So it was a kind of an interesting way from Lawrence to try and drive uptake and get those kids back into school down there. So it was really interesting. That's fantastic. And Mace, that's great news and a great update on last week's show when we had Nick Hammond here. His crowdfunding campaign went live on Friday. So for everybody who joined us last week, you've heard the news, and I hope you all got involved or signed up or already supported his crowdfunding campaign for the sequel of Around the World in 80 Cigars. If you haven't, check it out. It's live on Indiegogo, I believe. And also, as you heard last week, Reinhold from Cigar Journal has kindly offered to give a full year of subscription for the digital Cigar Journal magazine to everybody who's chiming in and become part of the crowdfunding campaign there. But without further ado, Jeff is with us, and I'm super honored, delighted, and very happy, Jeff, to see you again. We had the privilege and pleasure of hosting you at the Light 'em Up Lounge already once, a couple of months ago, but it's good to have you back, and what a privilege to see you. Thank you for joining us and taking the time today.
Thank you for having me on the show. I apologize about the snafus trying to get online, but we had to improvise, adapt, and overcome just to make this happen today. We had some of you know. I
greatly appreciate the efforts.
Well, you know Avo Vezian. He has the Avo cigar maker has a sister, Shaki Vezian. She's 94 years old and lives about 3 hours from us, and we kind of have to help out sometimes. So I had to I had to take
Wow.
Avo's sister to the doctor today unexpectedly. So anyway, that's why I'm a little flustered and late, but I appreciate being here. And I wish I could light up the cigar, but you're not going to believe this. I'm doing it from a hotel lobby. I just ran in here and asked if I could use their Wi-Fi to do this. So anyway, I'm glad to be here.
It's such a wonderful treat to have you, and despite all the obstacles, well, it's fantastic to have you with us. And what a lovely story. I didn't know that that you actually had those special ties with the Uvesian family, and that you're still taking care of the lady. So that's magnificent.
Yeah, well, Avo was both my boys, his godfather. So actually, he made a cigar, a Boris 11, and a Van 22. So we had a long history together. So listen, we're all gonna get old one day, and hopefully somebody will go, do what we got to do when we can't do it ourselves.
Very much so. My grandmother, she's literally across the hallway, 102 now. A
Wow.
lot of our Light 'em Up family and friends know that I'm always kind of busy taking care of her, and sometimes I cut the show short a little bit just so I can make sure she gets to bed in perfect condition. But yeah, as you said, we're all gonna be at that stage of our life at some point, and it's wonderful to know that there are people who still take care of the elderly and take that effort.
I remind my kids every day. So what do you want to talk about today, man? We got a whole list of things we can go over.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, Jeff, I would love to make a special mention. And I want to give a shout out to dear friends and fellows that I know you also have a connection with. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce a very special event this Friday in Ybor City, the 128th JC Newman anniversary of the El Reloj cigar factory celebration there. And our friends from Shades of Havana, founder Michael Doyle and his team, they will be filming 6 video podcasts, and portions of each will be live streamed in the US, globally. And so this Friday at the JC Newman El Reloj cigar factory, Reinhold Widmeyer from Cigar Journal, who is in Florida at the moment, Bobby, Drew, and Eric will discuss and share some wonderful historic stories about the JC Newman factory, the family, of course, and the rich tobacco history in Florida and the entire US. Jeff, we will discuss that today at the show here as well. Our dear friend, our fellow Reinhold, the editor of Cigar Journal, is in Tampa, as I said, to celebrate that wonderful moment in time. And I think, Jeff, it would have been a treat. The Shades of Havana guys told me to have you and to hear some of your stories and your experiences with the Newman family and Tampa's rich historical implications in the tobacco and cigar industry. But I know that Michael and his team, they will also be filming at your Corona Cigar Lounge in Tampa on Sunday, May
Yeah.
7th. So they have kind of an epic series of podcast recording, video filming going on. And I know that your extensive knowledge will be tremendously appreciated and very important. We're going to hear a lot about that today. But I want to encourage all of you, and I would like to invite all of you, tune in, listen to the Shades of Havana podcast, watch the videos, and join the live stream during these special events on Friday and Sunday. And so I wanted to give a big shout out to those folks and everything they do. And it kind of leads us, Jeff, into kind of the historic implications of tobacco growing and cigar manufacturing in Florida. And I know you're huge into history and the tradition and culture of tobacco and cigars, not only in Florida, but in the entire US and beyond. And you have certainly created your own chapter in the tobacco history with Florida Sungrown, celebrating the 10th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, this year, right?
Yes, we started in 2013, so this is our 10th anniversary, and I think God threw a big hurdle at us this year to make sure we still want to do this, because, as you know, our we had a beautiful crop in the ground, and it was just like I mean, when I say beautiful, there's always challenges you got, right? You can have a lot of insect pressure, or have a disease problem, or too much rain or too much wind or whatever. We had a perfect crop going this year, and literally we're at the final stages where you top the plant. That's where you take the flowers off, and then the following week you go and harvest. That's when the plant is at its peak height, and every leaf that's on that plant is what you use. But unfortunately, we had a hailstorm last week. We get those occasionally, and we got a real bad one. Now, I've lived in Florida since 1974. We did have a bad one like that in the mid 90s. So we have had them happen before in my lifetime. But this thing came through actually, I thought it was in a tornado when it happened, because it was really, really severe. But it destroyed every plant that was in the field, ruined every leaf that's on a plant. So this year, unfortunately, the spring crop, we won't even get a single leaf off of it. But hey, those are the challenges. We know every farmer faces this, whether you're growing anything. Go back to biblical days between drought and locusts and everything else. Farming is always a challenge. But what's interesting is, I believe it was Hirochi Robani told me, he goes, listen, with the lifetime of farming him and his family have done in Cuba, he goes, it seems to run in threes. You'll have a wonderful crop, and then next year you have one that's good but not as good. And then usually, like every third year, you got some issues you got to deal with. And so and there's an old farmer saying, one for the bird, one for the bug, and one for me. So you do lose product. It's just Mother Nature. We work with it, we'll plant again in the fall. We're lucky that we live in Florida, where we can do two crops, a fall and a spring crop. If we were in Connecticut, the growing season isn't long enough to do two crops, but in Florida we can. So we'll just have to plant again, and there will be some shortages on our tobacco as a result of this. We were under a lot of pressure this year because our factories are running low on all the tobacco, because fortunately, we want to thank everybody that buys and smokes FSG cigars and cigars that are made with FSG tobacco. They as fast as we grow it, people smoke them. So anyway, we're gonna have a little bit of a challenge coming up, but hey, it's all part of the deal, and we'll keep plugging along.
I can only say kudos to you, and I have nothing but the highest respect and regards for everybody who upholds the tradition and serves the land and invests so much time, energy, and money into providing those fruits of Mother Nature that eventually, make their way into those delightful masterpieces that we all get to enjoy and share. And well, before we dive deeper, just a pure technical question, because interestingly enough, you mentioned you do two crops per year, which not a lot of growing areas could do or would do. What does that mean in terms of making sure that you keep the quality of the soil, of the nutrients? Do you rotate the crops so you never use one particular plot of land twice per year? Or how do you maintain the nutrients in the soil and thus the quality in the leaf?
Yeah, that's a great question. So literally you can grow a tobacco plant, or any plant for that matter, without soil at all. That's why you have hydroponic farming. It's just that you have to feed it, right? And tobacco is a heavy feeder. Uses a lot of nitrogen, and for every pound of nitrogen it uses is 3 pounds of potash. So fertilizer right now is extremely expensive. There are some shortages on it too, but we're able to get it. We also use we do a lot of traditional things the way we grow tobacco, but we also use some of the most modern techniques and practices, specifically in our we call it fertigation, meaning that we use micro drip tape in the rows, which allows the water to go right into the root zone. And the fertilizer we use is a liquid-based fertilizer that gets pumped and mixed in with the with the irrigation water. So there's no runoff, and there's no fertilizer that gets wasted. It goes right into the plant, into the root zone. So we're able to do that, and it is expensive. Listen, if you do that kind of stuff, it's real expensive. But we go into this where I'm not saying money is no object in what we spend on our tobacco, but at the end of the day, we're looking for the best tobacco, period. We don't have a constraint where typical commodity farming means that your buyers set the price, and you got to try to make sure your input costs are below whatever the market price is. We're not really a commodity. We're a one-off product. And so when we go to this, instead of the focus being on, hey, can we get our costs below what commodity price is? It's what do we got to do to produce the best cigar tobacco, period, regardless of cost. So that's always been the trajectory we've done. And that was always part of what, let me even back up further. Florida used to be the second largest cigar tobacco growing state in America after Connecticut. And again, even in Connecticut, tobacco is grown as a commodity, meaning that there's X amount of price that the buyers will pay, and you got to get it under that price. Well, that Florida was under that model too, but that's why the tobacco farming failed, is they couldn't keep. It was too expensive to grow in Florida. Not when you're in the 70s, you had the proliferation of cigar cultivation in Central America and in Dominican Republic. The labor costs there are a fraction of what they are in the US. So there was no way for Florida farmers to compete with Nicaragua, Honduras, and Dominican Republic. So eventually that's why the industry collapsed in Florida. So knowing that, we would never start growing a crop saying, hey, can we grow this for, compete with commodity pricing coming out of Nicaragua or something? No, that was never, we knew that from day one. So everything has always been about what does it take to grow the best tobacco. Now, there are other practices too in between. When we have a field sitting idle, in between we'll plant something called sun hemp, which is a plant from India that actually puts nutrients back in the soil, including nitrogen and organic material. And we work real closely with the University of Florida and their Department of Agriculture. And we've had their top scientists out to our farm several times, do soil analysis and do recommendations on things that are for, there's always new technology and studies being done, whether it's in environmental stewardship, which is a big one right now, which also leads into fertilizer. They're always trying to reduce the amount of nutrients that are being used. So yeah, we fortunately get to use those PhD guys that come in and they come to our farm and give advice and stuff. And sometimes what they talk about works, and sometimes it's like, yeah, didn't really do anything. So, but we're glad to have that. And in Florida in particular, the number one crop that's being grown in Florida right now is houses. So everybody keeps moving to the state. So agriculture land continues to dwindle, right? When you have a government agency that is big and is losing their customers, such as the farms and farmers, they tend to give you a lot of attention to any new farm that comes up. So that's one of the good parts about it, is that you don't have to twist anybody's arm to come out and help you at the farm. As far as the PhD guys, they love, it's like getting a customer on a call that there's not a lot of new farms popping up. So anyway, they've been real helpful. So hopefully that kind of explains what we do with in between the crops. The one thing that really prevents us from doing anything in the middle of the year is rain. Rainfall is what there's actually in the middle of the year, summertime, July and August. It's the rainy season, and if you get too much rain, your tobacco it'll die. The roots will get too wet and they just won't grow. The second time where we have our problem is January, February, and sometimes just the beginning of March, which is frost. So tobacco is not going to grow if it freezes. It's going to burn the leaves with the frost. So you got frost in the wintertime that stops you for a few months, in the rainy season in July, end of June, July, and August. So those are the two windows where we don't grow. Same thing in Nicaragua. It doesn't freeze there, but when they're in their rainy season, their soil is actually kind of muddy when it rains. We have sandy soil, so it drains really good. But rain is a limiting factor in a lot of parts of the world where they try to grow cigar tobacco.
Wonderful explanation, and I'm always fascinated when I can listen to you talking about the agricultural component. It's a deep dive into what the most important aspect of cigar culture in general, right? In the first place, because that's where it all starts. Those precious raw materials that will eventually end up in a handmade premium cigar. That's where it all comes from. You touched upon the historical component as well, and the challenges for tobacco in being grown in Florida nowadays. I mean, you've built an empire with Corona Cigar. You're one of the most successful and most powerful tobacconist retailers in the country. You've built an incredible operation and business there, and people can only applaud you and congratulate for what you've managed to do with Corona Cigar. And then you decide, as kind of a very ambitious side hustle, with to venture into growing tobacco under the most challenging circumstances, as you said, against all adversities. Why? I mean, most people would probably rest on their laurels and continue the business. I know you always had a fond interest in agriculture in general and a strong connection to stewarding the land. But why take that leap and why face that challenge?
Well, there's several reasons, but I think a lot of it goes to there's certain things that we've done generationally before us that it's no longer done. It's like a lost art. And so, cigar tobacco farming in Florida, the fact that it went away for 50 years, and I'm a retailer that how you have the farm to table concept. Well, I've got the table, right? Let's do the farm. So that's why I wanted to do it, but also I had the wherewithal to do it, because you can't make money growing cigar tobacco. You have to take this commitment on, knowing you're going to do a ton of work. And when I say work, there's one thing about doing work in the office, but I'm talking about physical work, hard labor, where it's hot outside. So this is taking on a project that's physically demanding. Number two, it's going to take a lot of money, because you're going to have to put a lot of money into the farm, and you're probably not going to get it back out. But at the same time, we're not going to lose money on it, right? So this is a sustainable farming operation, but it's not a profitable farming operation. But that's fine. That's not why we did it. We've got the table. That's the part that's important. In the farm to table concept, we've got the table. We've got a great retail operation. We have great mail order. We have great connection with our customers. And we wanted to give them an entree that you couldn't get anywhere else, meaning that when you work with these great cigar factories like we do, whether it's J.C. Newman, whether it's Drew Estate, whether it's Aganorsa, whether it's Davidoff, whatever, the guys that are in the factory are like chefs, right? They're going to blend tobaccos from all over the world to create these wonderful cigars. Well, we're allowing them to work with a new ingredient. It's new to them, but it's actually not new to society. I mean, guys, 100 years ago were smoking Cuban seed tobacco grown in Florida. It was actually 150 years ago they were doing it. So if we could bring that back and bring that raw material back to work into the blends, we've created something that allows us to smoke a cigar and enjoy a cigar that people haven't been able to do for generations. And that was more important to me than anything. And also, I have a personal affinity to agriculture. I enjoy it. It's my everybody has their outlet, whether it's mountain biking or weightlifting, whatever. My outlet is I really like to work in agriculture, whether it's cattle, whether it's tobacco. And what's interesting too, the guys that grow a lot of cigar tobacco, you talk about Plasencia in Nicaragua and Honduras, Pepin Garcia, Eduardo Fernandez in Aganorsa. There's something that's weird that all these guys that grow a lot of cigar tobacco also do beef cattle. And I don't know whether it's just something that because we do the same thing. And I don't know whether it's like a nice little yin and yang between when you get done working tobacco, you like to work cows. I don't know whether that's just something in our DNA, but when you have a connection to agriculture, listen, God put everybody else on the planet to do certain things. If it wasn't for the guys that grow food, society would collapse. So there's certain things that drive people, and retail, great whiskey, great cigars, great steaks. I love all that stuff. So it's kind of it's a full circle thing for me. I find it fulfilling, and I like to see the smiles on people's faces when we, hand them a great cigar or a great FSG burger or whatever it is. It's just we're in a good business where we provide a lot of pleasure to people, and that's the ultimate reward.
I couldn't agree more. And funnily enough, it seems that in this day and age where everybody is talking about AI more than ever, ChatGPT, and how dramatically things are changing at a pace that nobody could have possibly imagined, there seems to be a bit of a resurgence of, or like a tendency where people want to go back to what's true, like honest physical labor, and some of these wonderful products that only Mother Nature can bring. Do you feel that also with your operation or people's interest in what you do with FSG?
Absolutely, and I'll give you another example. This kind of started a while ago, and I credit a lot of it to A&E and Discovery Channel, but even now with YouTube, and you look at what kids watch. There are channels that are just devoted to how to do certain things, right? And you'd be surprised, let's say you make a knife, right? You can get a knife made in China, cost you X amount of dollars and whatever. But then you see these guys that literally start with springs, old car springs and axles and stuff, melt it down, forge it, and handcraft a knife like they did, 100 or 1,000 years ago. And people appreciate that. And when they see what goes into it, people buy them too. Because that this is so old school handcrafted stuff, whether it's whether how we grow cigar tobacco or make a knife or whatever, there is an affinity for that. And I also think that when you mention things like the AI and things like that, it also makes people step back and say, hey, we got two forks in the road here, right? We have the high tech, and then we have, well, high tech is great, but what if I what if I don't have any food, or what if I don't, what am I gonna do if there's no electricity, or there's things, there's two, people's brains are going in two directions simultaneously. So we are living in a very interesting time right now, and we'll see where it goes.
Speaking of those two different alleyways, do you also see them come together, or do you use certain modern technology for the growing operations at FSG as well?
Here's sometimes technology, especially in farming, sometimes the technology is developed just for the sake of trying to develop something new. Take, for example, a few years ago, we had a water study done on our irrigation system, right? And they have these what are called moisture tension meters, which can go in your soil and measure your soil moisture, and you can use your cell phone to watch it and stuff. But as an experienced tobacco grower, I really don't need that moisture sensor, because my eyeballs can tell. The plant will tell you when it's dry. Tobacco leaves wilt and they wilt in the heat, but then they spring back up when the sun goes down. So there are certain things that, they make this technology that's it works, but at the same time, do you really need all that when I can just look at the field and say, hey, go turn the water on, right? And we got to, obviously we have a automatic valves where we can time them and stuff like that, but that's not that high tech. Or other things like on a tractor, there's certain things you can put where it's like GPS controlled and stuff. And it's like, well, I can kind of steer it straight, so it depends. So sometimes stuff is technology sometimes is put in where we can do without it. Actually, we see that in the cigar store too, in retail. Sometimes there's technology works great, it's fantastic for that, but other times it's like, dude, we'll spend half an hour doing this high tech one thing when I can have it done in 10 minutes doing it the old fashioned way. So it costs you a ton of money for the technology. So anyway,
and even worse, sometimes we probably lose that personal connection and that human touch, or the sensitivity to all the inputs that we will be getting from other people, from Mother Nature, because we rely on tech, or we just try to improve for technical improvement's sake, where, as you said, there's actually no need for it?
Well, let me take it one step further. So all our POS systems now, everything's going to the cloud, right? Meaning that you don't own the software on your own machines, it goes to the cloud. So when the internet goes down, or if there's something wrong with the cloud computers, your registers don't work, right? Now, I'm old school. My wife is even more old school when it comes to that. The younger generation will say, oh, we're closed. We can't do any sales right now because our POS is down. They never operated a cash register. I mean, we didn't, when we started Corona Cigar, we used a cash register, right? So it's like, dude, if the internet's down, get out a pad and paper. And if the guy's paying cash, just write it down. We'll ring it up when the system comes back online. But you'll be surprised how some people can't, honestly, they like shut down. As soon as the internet or something shuts down, they shut down. And you have to be resourceful on how to figure this stuff out, because you cannot be 100% reliant on technology. You have to have a backup. What's the manual backup if the technology fails? But you will be so surprised to see how some people literally shut down, freeze, and don't know how to do anything if the technology fails.
I hear you. Well, I'm curious, when you started FSG 10 years ago, and probably before that, when you started to conceptualize and build the whole thing in your brain concept, you had support and input from a lot of the great tobacco growers, some of which you mentioned earlier. How much was actual trial and error then, though, once you actually started? And I'm just thinking out loud here, like which seed varietals to use, which particular seed varietal would be most suitable to the sandy soil and the specific conditions that you mentioned, the microclimate and the terroir in Florida, the way you process the tobacco, the way you work it in the pre-industry. You can always make a plan for something, and then reality kicks in, and you go back to the drawing board.
So for me, what it was, Eduardo Fernandez is a good friend of mine, and I did everything like they did at his farm. He provided me with two seed varieties, the ones he used, a Criollo and a Corojo. We did a test crop using both. We used the same plant spacing that they did in Nicaragua. We followed all those things, but also Google has archived books from 120 years ago, 130 years ago. And the Department of Agriculture in the United States, because when US was first, people were pioneering and moving out to the States, the US government would literally provide how-to manuals on how to grow certain crops. We were an agrarian society up until the 1900s. So literally there's a book from 1898, you can look it up and find it online. And it basically tells you how to grow cigar tobacco. And it'll tell you how to do it in every state, by the way, because cigar tobacco was grown in Maryland, it was grown in Wisconsin, it was grown in New York, it was grown in a lot of places. Actually, tobacco is what America was founded on, but they didn't find gold here. So it was tobacco that kind of saved the first colonies here. So anyway, you can look at those old books, and the terminology is a little different back then because they'll talk about things that we don't use anymore, like guano and manure and all that other stuff. So they'll talk about old stuff. But at the end of the day, I've said this 100 times, that the tobacco that's in this cigar right here doesn't know right now whether it's in 2023 or 1823. It has no sense of time. Okay. So if they were successfully cultivating cigar tobacco 150 years ago in Florida, or anywhere for that matter, there's no reason you couldn't do it again today. And so you take the advice of the farmers who are actively growing, and then you also look back in history what was done, and then start your trials. And when I say start your trials, because what happens is things that work in Connecticut or work in Nicaragua, we may or may not need. I'll give you a perfect example. When I built our first curing barn, I set it up where it could be ventilated and heated. Well, that's because I was looking at what they did in Connecticut. Connecticut, they'd run heaters. In Nicaragua, they run heaters too. Meaning that when you put the tobacco in the barn, remember they're growing it in October, no, actually start harvesting November, December, January, February in Nicaragua. Nicaragua is 1,300, 1,500 feet above sea level. The higher you go in altitude, the colder it gets at night. Even though Nicaragua is a little more southern than Florida, but still it's high altitude. We're only 115 feet above sea level. It doesn't cool down like that at night. So I originally set it up for heaters. Well, we never once had to use the heaters, and we never once had to open our barn to ventilate it. We'd actually do the exact opposite. We keep our barn closed to keep humidity in the barn. So those were certain things that, you know, we had to we learned by, you know, trial. And so every area has there's different conditions. I will say this though, for us, because we're not that far from Cuba. We're actually the closest farms to Cuba, and we're at the same altitude. Altitude is key. So whatever works in Cuba works in our farm in Florida. So then I really started watching, hey, what do they do in Cuba here, and the way they set up their barn and all the other stuff. And so yeah, we it was a lot of there was trial and error, but luckily there wasn't much error, because we you know, I have an understanding for agriculture, so you know, we didn't have too much. We have definitely had some errors. I remember one time it was a human error where one of our farm crew put herbicide in the sprayer when it was supposed to be a fungicide, and killed everything. But those things happen. People make mistakes. You know, could be worse. You know, it could have been a nurse that did that in a in a hospital and killed their patient. But instead, it's just you know, it was a crop of tobacco. So things happen. People make mistakes, right? And you just move on. But other than that, trial and error, we've got it dialed in now. Fortunately, we really have our crops dialed in. But same time, listen, Mother Nature, you'll never dial that in. Hailstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes, that's all part of it. And you just, you know, roll with the punches.
How much do you try to deviate from that original path that you developed or observed with Eduardo, and then you implemented some of those processes in Florida? Like, did you ever try other seed varietals, or just try different methods to see how you could possibly tweak the processes and create like a unique identity for the FSG?
So seed varietals, we started out with a Corojo and a Criollo seed variety. Both of them looked almost identical on the plant. The Criollo is a little more of a barrel shaped, so it's a little bigger leaf. It gives you a little more pounds per acre. But I personally like the flavor profile of the Corojo tobacco. So we grew that strictly Corojo for about 5 years. Then there's a new variety. It was called Corojo 2012, a new seed variety that Cuba released, and we made the switch to Corojo 2012 probably about 4 years ago. I did it a couple years after Cuba did. The reason being is I wanted to see how the marketplace reacted to that seed variety that the Cuban cigar switched to. And when I say they switched, it's still a Corojo seed. They made one little tweak to it to make it more disease resistant, because they're having a problem with something called black shank in Cuba. Fortunately, I don't get it. Our soil doesn't have it in it. So we don't lose plants to black shank, but I know that is a challenge in Cuba. So this seed variety is a little more disease resistant, which still I think it helps too for us. We have, you know, the leaves. When I say the leaves can be cleaner, it means you might not see as many little spots that could be on there. Spots are generally just a little bit of fungus that's starting to develop on a plant, which is natural. A lot of, you know, when we talk about trial and error, there's two things that I did in the beginning. I used to try to control this, I called it a weed, but it's nut sage. It looks like a grass. I used to try to control it with herbicide. And then the second thing we have is our soil is very active. When your soil has tons of microbes in it, it's very active. And those microbes are what decompose dead plant material. You have to have active soil. That's what good, healthy soil is. However, when those microbes get on a living plant, they try to start decomposing it, which makes, there's something called target spot. So anyway, I used to spray for this grass, but then I learned if I leave the grass growing in between the rows, it keeps the dust down, and that dust keeps the microbes off the leaves, and therefore keeps the leaves from getting those spots on it. So number one, I didn't have to spray. You know, we try to use as little herbicides and chemicals as possible. So number one, I eliminated using the herbicide, and number two, I was able to cut down on the fungicide because the leaves didn't have the dust on them. So that was part of the learning curve, right? But I always like to figure out, try to learn, work with nature, the more you can work with Mother Nature, the better it is, because you're not fighting it. Instead of fighting it, work with it, right? So yeah, that wasn't one of those things that was a trial and error. It was just we learned as we went, right? So seed varieties, I'm going to stick with Corojo no matter what. I know there is another version of Corojo out there from Cuba. They're, like I said, they're constantly working on these varieties that are disease resistant. In the future, maybe I'll try it, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Right now, I'm happy with the Corojo 2012 that we've been growing for the last few years.
Do you believe that the concept of organic tobacco farming could possibly be achieved, or could become a sustainable operation and business proposition? And Nestor Andres was always big into that, right? And he's adamant about the fact that, you know, it all starts with great soil, and you have to take care of the land and provide it with all the necessary nutrients. He did all these trials with organic tobacco, but how much of that do you think is feasible, or could be a sustainable business proposition as well?
So for us, it wouldn't be the one thing that wouldn't happen. The bugs would eat our crop, because we have there's a type of worm that basically, whenever you see these moths flying around your lights at night, those all started as a little worm, and those worms love tobacco, especially when it gets into the bud stage where the flower is, because that's real sweet. So tobacco bud worms, you have to spray for those. As far as herbicide, we don't use any herbicide at all. We use something called plastic mulch that's actually made out of cornstarch. It's biodegradable. We made that switch to about 6 years ago. That's another thing technology helped out. In Florida, and I don't know if you see this in Europe, but before they start planting like the strawberries or anything else, you'll see these rows that have like, they're square and they have like plastic over the top. That plastic keeps weeds down and also keep moisture in your soil, so you use less water. When you use less water, also you use less fertilizer. So anyway, we use that plastic mulch, but again, now it's biodegradable because it's made out of a cornstarch. We till it into the ground and actually helps build the soil. But as far as not being able to grow without any control for worms, I don't think that's possible. You might be able to do it in Hawaii, because from what I understand is like Hawaii doesn't have any bugs. I don't know if that's true, but supposedly, I don't know. But Florida's crawling with bugs, and I know Nicaragua's got bud worms too. So, but here's what has been done. When we talk about technology and agri-science, these companies like Dow and others, they're big companies. They are always developing stuff. So now the latest thing when it comes to agriculture science is coming up with pesticides that leave zero residue. So there's no residual on the plant. Number two, they're very targeted, meaning they only kill this, in this case, it only kills a worm. The third thing that's very important is you don't harm bees, honeybees. Bees are critical for life on the planet. So there's been a lot of development in anything when you spray in for bugs that they don't fall into those three categories. And also, they have to be safe for the environment. So what happens is the sprays that are used now are much less toxic, but they're super expensive. So they, like I said, they only kill the worms, but man, some of the stuff I use, it's $900 a gallon, $900. So yeah, it's crazy. So anyway, but we use it because number one, honeybees are really important for us. You know, we have FSG tobacco honey.
You have your own honey, exactly.
Yeah, and so we have a neighbor that has the aviary, and we harvest that honey. So we're very, very conscious of honeybees. But back to the question, as far as organic tobacco goes, you can use processes that are organic, but the part that people don't realize about organic, let's look at organic produce, okay? When you buy a tomato that's organic versus one that's not organic, the organic one costs more. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. If you didn't have to use any herbicides, or any fungicides, or any pesticides, the organic should cost less because you didn't have to run a crew and a tractor and buy those chemicals to spray, right? So why does organic cost more than the non-organic? I can tell you why. Because for every one tomato that's organic, they threw one away. because what happens is there's tremendous waste in organic. Because what happens is what they do is they're culling out a lot of product before it gets to the grocery store. These things are inspected, or when they're picking it too. If it has holes in it from a bug, or if it's got spots on it from a fungus, they're not picking it, or it gets cold and thrown out, right? So it's a less efficient way of growing food. Now, they don't tell you that, but I'm telling you as a farmer, this is the truth. And also, that's why organic costs more. Organic should actually cost you a lot less, because if 10% of your cost is in herbicide or pesticide or fungicide, that tomato should be 10% less. It's not. It's 10% or 20% more. So there's certain things that we don't always get the full story about what goes on, but that is the case. But I will say this: I don't know of a farmer out there who's not trying to be an excellent steward of the land. And when I say steward of the land, is that we may think we own our farm or own our land. We're actually just temporarily taking care of that land, because you're going to die and that land's still going to be there, and it's going to be there after the next guy dies and the next guy dies. So you're just temporarily in custody of this land, and the land is your biggest asset as a farmer. So you want to take care of it. You have to take care of it. No one wants to, not take care of their own property or their own soil or their own farm, right? And you're also conscious of, you're not going to spray or use chemicals. You don't have to, especially when they're very expensive. So farmers, just by their very nature, are always looking out to be great stewards of the land, whether it's their livestock or whether it's their land or both. That is their assets, and they have every reason in the world to treat their livestock or treat their land as best they can, even better than any scientist or anybody environmentalist or whatever that wants to come out there, because they're not hooked to that piece of land, whereas the landowner is. So that's one of the most important things to think about, is that, trust me, the farmers want to take care of their properties.
That's a wonderful, wonderful thought, Jeff. And I want to thank you for that. What a crucially important thought and comment there. And it shows the love and the appreciation and the passion that goes into every single seed and every touch that you do, and every element of the work. So I think that's fantastic. Brian in California has a question for you, so I'm excited to have Brian with us as always. Good to see you, my fellow.
Thank you. California versus Florida again. I'm really enjoying this chat. I love everything you're saying. The thing about being resourceful in terms of technology and stuff, that's great. There's a little locally owned coffee shop down the street where we go. We don't go to Starbucks unless we have to. And they had a situation one day where I think it was cash only. They had some technology problem and the credit wasn't working, so it was cash only. And the owner was like, "You don't have cash? Get us next time." It's the honor system. Like, for real, just be honest, come back, pay for it next time. Like, and if you want to steal, that's on you. And like, which is crazy, because like, we're in Los Angeles, like this is not the middle of nowhere, but the place is built on regulars and we all know each other. And so that was cool. Something that happened crazy the other day there was, for whatever reason, someone couldn't pay. I don't know why. It wasn't like they didn't have money. I don't know. Maybe it was only cash or something. Couldn't pay for their coffee. Person behind them offers to pay. Oh, that's very nice. Oh, that's so kind of you. Thank you. And then the person behind that noticed that person had paid for their coffee. It's like, you know what? I'm going to get their coffee. And then it started a game. So everybody was paying for the person's coffee ahead of them for like 2 hours. This went on. It was bonkers. Anyway, questions. So I'm wondering about the name Corona and its concept, why that was the choice originally. And then a weird question just in terms of, I mean, I know COVID didn't happen in Florida, but when that happened, in my mind, I was always curious about like Corona the beer. And I'm like, I wonder if they're struggling just because this thing is called a coronavirus. Like, did you have any like occurrences where you felt like people were having an issue with the name just based on this stupid virus?
So great question. So first off, the reason I selected the name Corona Cigar Company was back in 1995, before I started the company. There were I wanted something that was pay homage to the Latin culture. So I wanted a Spanish name, but being a gringo, I saw a lot of names that people could never pronounce or never remember. So Corona was a word that was easy for a non-Hispanic to say and remember, right? Number two, being a crown, I thought it'd make a cool logo. Back to the Corona beer thing and the coronavirus. I will say one thing on Corona beer. We actually had a lawsuit with them a few years ago. It was interesting because we always sold Corona beer in our stores, and then Corona beer got sold to another company. And whenever they sell, a new set of lawyers start looking at the things. And where we pushed the envelope was we were bringing in coffee from Nicaragua, and we wanted to trademark the word Corona coffee. That set off the Corona guys. They're like, listen, that's the beverage category. We can't have that. So they filed a suit on us. So I said, listen, we'll exit the beverage category, no problem. But they said, hey, by the way, your Corona cigar logo, we want you to change the blue to red. We want you to make the word cigar a little bigger. So we did that and we settled. There was no cash exchange. Anything. It was just a settlement, making some changes. But the good part was it was settled with something called non-prejudice, without prejudice, meaning that we'll never have to cross that bridge again. Us and Corona beer, we've got it worked out. So that's good. Now let's move on to our coronavirus. It's interesting you say that. I have my truck has a tag that says 1 Corona on it. And I remember getting gas and somebody freaking out, thinking like my truck had COVID. I'm like, this is how stupid some people were about this stuff. So anyway, they made some comment about that. I'm like, all right, whatever. But you know where it hurt us was we do a lot of social media, right? And we do a lot of SEO work. Corona hurt us because what happened is Facebook and Twitter were censoring anything with the word Corona. And then they would throw up that stupid virus warning saying you misinformation, all this other shit. I'm sorry for cursing. I get a little wound up about the subject. So anyway, yeah, man, we our post, just because it said Corona cigar in it, freaking Facebook was saying it was misinformation, and they were tagging any of our stuff, and it was like, so that's what became more challenging, is that the false fact checkers were sitting there they were literally hiding some of our posts because our company name is Corona Cigar Company, and that keyword would set off the censors and either ghost your posts or push them down or flag a warning. So that's where it became a little difficult for us. But hey, listen, we're through that. But believe it or not, the word Corona still will it's still under their fact check thing. So we're still having a little bit of difficulty with that.
Wow, that is fascinating. That's better answer than I could have imagined. We have our resident lawyer Macy's here. I'm sure he has something to say about the Corona beer litigations. But I just had one more. Just if you could go into the detail about the Drew Estate FSG making the switch so that it's just for you. Kind of how did that come about?
Yeah, so what they did is the 20-acre farm was released last year. And so that's the brand that Drew Estate wants to use in their, what is called the DDRP, their Drew Diplomat Retailer Program. So these are the stores that actually get Liga Privada and a lot of limited edition cigars. So they made the switch to the 20-acre farm, and then FSG became exclusive to us, to Corona Cigar. 20-acre farm has been a huge success. It's got a flavor profile that's extremely, when you look at the segment of cigar consumers out there, this one fits a large segment because it's a milder to medium cigar. Even guys like stronger cigars will like it. They're like, hey, it's got a lot of good flavor, but it's not overpowering. So it's very, I love the cigar, and it's just something that's very, very appealing to a very large audience.
I had one recently. It was great. Yeah, fantastic.
Thank you.
Cool. Cheers.
Jeff, the question from Brian kind of gave us a little bit of a segue from the tobacco growing into the manufacturing side and also the retail side. First of all, again, we mentioned earlier the Shades of Havana program, the podcast that people should check out in anticipation of that wonderful 128th anniversary coming up with Drew's Jason Newman. Apologies. So, can you talk a little bit about your connection with the Newman family, your the rolling operations, some of the feedback that you're probably getting from the manufacturing side in regards to tobacco and how you could possibly make certain adjustments, changes, and tweaks to suit their needs a little better. I'm curious about that side of the industry, the business.
So JC Newman is a family that I have a huge respect for, and a great affinity for the generational side of it. Eric and Bobby and myself became good friends back around 2002. Now, Stanford Newman was alive back then. I remember when Stanford came over to the store with Eric and Bobby, and it was because of Drew Newman, who was just a teenager at the time. He wasn't even old enough to smoke cigars. He's like, "Dad, you got to go check out the store over in Orlando." And we became really good friends. And I tell you, I have an affinity for history, and I have an affinity for independently family-owned companies, and especially the JC Newman Cigar Factory being the last cigar factory in Tampa, a city that is called the Cigar City, a city that made as many cigars, just the city of Tampa made as many cigars as all the cigars are made in the world right now. That's how many cigars Tampa was putting out. So to see an industry that was that big in the 1900s go to what it is today with one cigar factory left, right? In 100, started 1888, so 128-year history. To me, that's just a big deal. Eric and Bobby, the one thing I really enjoy about them being a family-owned company is that they can make their decisions on their own without having to run through a board of directors or a panel or they hire marketing companies to make decisions. When you deal with a family company, they can make their own decisions. And these guys are cut from a cloth of honor and integrity and family values, which is what is just I really like. So it's kind of interesting. When I started the cigar farm, tobacco farm, Eric was like, "Jeff, you're crazy. Don't do this." And then, but at the same time, Drew was like, "Hey, this is one of the coolest things I've seen." And so Drew Newman kind of did the same thing by starting that rolling gallery on the third floor, and revitalizing the handmade cigar factory at the JC Newman factory. Now he's even restoring a old hotel across the street. He's got cigar makers park across the street. So Drew is really taking it to another level of bringing back the historical component, but also he's from a generation where he sees where people like this. You know what I mean? His generation appreciates the things that have been lost, and then the few places that still have it. So while Eric wasn't always on board with Drew remodeling the factory and turning it into a museum and tours and all that, Drew saw, but it's a generational difference, right? So anyway, there's a lot of similarities between JC Newman, Corona Cigar, and we work together on a lot of projects. We've got a Diamond Crown Lounge in our downtown store. We got a Diamond Crown Lounge we're going to do for our Tampa store, and the American Cigar, which uses our wrapper from our farm. We've just, again, I'm not into making cigars, and I don't want to have a cigar factory. So it's nice to have, grow that Florida cigar tobacco made in the city in Florida, Tampa, and then, selling that cigar that's all 100% American made and American. When I say American products, everything from the band to the box to the clasp was all American made, and we appreciate that. So we kind of are singing from the same hymn sheet, and that's why I think there's a lot of besides business wise, like I said, Bobby and I used to go to Washington D.C. and we lobbied all the time together, and we've just been really good friends.
Yeah, that's a wonderful statement and a wonderful thought, and kudos to them and everything that they have built and continue to do so. Well, most certainly. How do you think the industry could possibly do more or do better in trying to revitalize some of those aspects that you mentioned, to probably bring back more of that rich tobacco and cigar manufacturing tradition to US soil and incentivize more entrepreneurs or just crazy minds who would like to venture into something as labor and money intense as either growing tobacco or manufacturing cigars in the United States?
So I think the industry's doing pretty good as far as like, JC Newman's keeping that flag flying in Tampa, and I don't see any threat of that. There's always been that entrepreneur spirit of they used to call these guys Buckeye rollers. There were always little cigar factories across America. There were thousands of them, right? But we still have a good amount of, the 1-2 roller type of things. Yeah, you see them in New Orleans, you see them in Miami, I've seen in New Jersey. I've seen these little cigar factories that are around the country. There's not a bunch of them, but there's still, these they generally are people that used to roll cigars in Cuba or Nicaragua or whatever. So that's still kind of going on. The entrepreneur spirit of cigar retailers, that's strong. Guys are always opening up, shops and things like that. The real area that needs some help though is the Connecticut shade in Connecticut. There is no more of that. Somebody's got to take that ball and run with it. I don't know when it'll happen, but it will. My gut tells me at some time there's going to be one of these farmers' kids that say, "Hey, Dad, man, I want to grow shade again." And there's going to be some cigar maker that's going to say, "Hey, we're going to partner with you. We're going to buy all this leaf. We know it's going to cost twice as much as what we pay for Ecuador, but we're going to market this, and it's going to be a genuine article, USA, Connecticut shade tobacco." That hasn't happened yet, but at some point, I foresee it happening. Or at least I hope it happens, but I think it will because we're a model for it. We've shown that it can be done, and I didn't start with a farm. So there's farms are generational, and there's guys up in Connecticut that used to grow it. I know 4 different guys that grow it. That one, the patron guys like my age won't necessarily do it because we're tired. You know what I mean? It's a lot of work to take on this project, right? But it's their kids. It's their 22-year-old kid that says, "Dad, I want to do this," and he's got the energy, and we got the old equipment. Let's bring it back out, and, or we'll make new stuff and figure it out. I think that'll happen. And it as a retailer, I can tell you right now, conceptually, I know it can work. Hell, I can sell a cigar like that, especially when we say, "Hey, this is the only cigar. It's got legit USA Connecticut." There's still Connecticut out there that was grown in Connecticut because it's been a couple of years since it wasn't grown. And guys like General Cigar and Fuente and these other guys, they buy 10 years worth of tobacco, right? But at some point, that USA grown shade is going to be gone. There won't be any more, period. And as much as Ecuador shade and Connecticut shade and even Nicaraguan shade kind of look the same, they don't quite taste the same. And I'll say this from an unbiased opinion. Connecticut shade grown in the USA has a more flavorful profile than Ecuador shade. Ecuador shade may be cleaner. When I say cleaner, meaning the colors are more even. There's less what we would call muddiness on the wrapper, so that the wrapper is that more golden hue, and you don't see those little kind of grayish tint to it and stuff. But Connecticut shade has a very unique nuttiness to it that you won't get out of Ecuador. So at some point, I don't know when it'll happen, but at some point, I think that USA Connecticut shade grown with a farm that people can visit, that's key too. It's very important. People have to actually see the farm, see the shade, see the tobacco. Otherwise, it's not believable. So anyway,
that's a very interesting thought. And a little follow-up question on that, and probably a bit of a sidestep here, but funnily enough, Austria, I'm blessed to live in this country, which is beautifully green and luscious with so many green areas, mountains, lakes, forests. But we're pretty good at floor sealing, actually, and it's devastating and it hurts whenever you see it, read it, hear about it, and I believe that's a huge problem in areas where shade tobacco used to be grown, where broadleaf used to be grown, because a lot of those people sold the land because they could make a fortune, and people were afterwards building a huge, supermarket or cinema on top of it. How much of that land is actually lost? And do you still think there's considerable plots of land where you could bring back some of those farming operations?
So that's a great point. One of the biggest farm shade operations was Thrall Tobacco in Hartford, Connecticut. And literally, as you flew into the airport in Connecticut, you'd see all these white tents. All the fields would just be white. You see the cheesecloth. That was all shade. Now there's Amazon warehouse, Honda automotive warehouse, things like that. Because also they're right near the airport, right? So logistically, it's a good hub for logistics. However, there's always those farms that are a little further away. And in America, we have this program that are called conservation easements. What happens is when a farmer dies, the family gets the land and they have to make a choice. Generally, if let's just use even numbers, right? Let's say it was a 100-acre field. Well, if you have 4 kids, now it's 25 acres, unless that one kid buys out the other, or if dad just says, hey, one kid's getting it, the others aren't, right? So land plots continually get smaller. There is a way that land can be kept in farming where the government actually buys they pay for the rights to keep that in a perpetual conservation easement, meaning that land can never be developed. No matter the second, third, fourth owner of that land, it can never be developed. It always has to remain in an agriculture state. So that is something that America does in order to keep certain agriculture lands from disappearing. So there is somewhat of a solution. The first generation, when they do sell it as a conservation easement, they kind of cash out. And after that, the land is, it's not going to be worth as much anymore because now you can't sell it to put a warehouse on it. Now you can't sell it to put a subdivision. It's going to stay a farm no matter what. But there are programs to try and help that. And the government has recognized that, especially in Florida, because agriculture land, that's where you get your water for your aquifer. Rainwater does not percolate through asphalt and concrete. It only percolates through soil. So that's why you have to have these green spaces where it's either farms or pastures. And that's another thing. People are really, the beef industry is getting a bad rap on this, thinking cows are bad for the environment. They're the best thing there is for environment. They can actually take grass that we can't eat and turn it into protein that we can eat. So they're transforming it. And also when grass is mowed or grazed, it makes it grow faster. So the carbon sequestration in grass is much more rapid if it's growing versus if it's just left where it's not cut or grazed. So anyway, so they have these conservation easements to keep some of these big ranches around because of that. And again, the water for your aquifer and your rivers and everything else, the headwaters are generally your pastures in these areas that are farmland.
Fascinating. I'm curious, Jeff, all that rich knowledge that you have about agriculture in many different segments and fields of expertise, is that something you just naturally developed over the years? Did you specifically study some of those elements and different industries and segments? Because yeah, for me, it's just fascinating. I'm sitting here mesmerized, soaking up every little bit of information. I love it. So I'm curious.
I'm glad. So when I was in high school, I wanted to be a farmer. I was in Future Farmers of America. I was very active in that. I loved it. The problem with agriculture is that you can't be a farmer unless you inherit land or later acquire enough money to buy land. Farmland's expensive. So I was the guy that always wanted that. And I was always telling my wife if I won the lottery, I wanted a big orange grove. So anyway, it's one of those things that I have had an affinity for. But most people have multiple affinities. I love cigars. I love the retailing side of it. I love the cigar bar side of it. I love the cigar fields, the factories, everything. So it's nice when you can bring all those things, encompass them together. And so it's kind of what I do. But yeah, I have always studied agriculture as well as business and yeah. Listen, we got to have guys that know how to program computers. We got to have guys know how to grow food.
Amen. Mace, over to you.
Hey, thank you very much, Reinhard. Jeff, great to meet you. Great, fascinating listening to you. I think I'm going to echo what Reinhard's saying there. For me, coming from a family that's sort of in agriculture, farming in Southern Africa, it's interesting. We always tend to have convoys around the retail side and the the manufacturing side of things, it's interesting sort of listening to you talking about that actual growing and sort of your real affinity and love for that element of it. So it's absolutely fascinating to sit here and listen to you about that. I guess I had a couple of questions, and one was just, and it's sort of listening to you now, it's sort of going back a little bit more in terms of, we hear about challenges around legislation when it comes to the retail side of things, and the naming conventions and selling to minors and all of this. And I just wanted to understand a bit more in terms of, in the US especially, do you find legislation targeting that side of the growing side of things more? Is it something that you feel is potentially putting people off getting into it? Or what do you think are the challenges in terms of people actually getting into it more? Is it just that the land has been sold and there's just no more available land, or what's?
Yeah. As far as growing tobacco there, or even farming, it's not legislation, it's just dollars. The real estate's so valuable. And also you got to remember, there's a global consolidation on everything. So farmland in America is being bought up by, Bill Gates and Chinese and a lot of other places, because at the end of the day, food is the most critical element to keep a civilization, fed and keep people from overthrowing a government, right? So farmland is always going to be valuable and is becoming more valuable. I wanted to you mentioned about Africa. I'll tell you what's pretty interesting. A lot of people, some people know, some don't, but Cameroon, the western country of Cameroon, grows great wrapper leaf, and Marifel is the Cameroon guy, right? Cameroon is grown on small family plots. When I say small family plots, it's usually an acre where their house is. And so that's like a true, let's say, independent farmers that grow their tobacco, gather and sell it. There was a fellow I met in a Tampa store, though, that gave me a cigar from another African country, and I can't think of it right now, but it's just north of South Africa on the eastern coast. It wasn't Zimbabwe, but they grew cigar tobacco. Say again?
Botswana?
No, it wasn't Botswana either. I can't think of it. I thought it started with an M, but the brand of cigars, not only was the tobacco grown there, but the cigar was rolled there. And he gave it to me as a gift. And I was like, man, I'm really excited to smoke this, because number one, it was from a country I'd never smoked tobacco from, which to me is fascinating, because whenever you take, it doesn't matter whether it's Cuban seed or Sumatra seed, wherever, if you grow it in a different country, it's going to taste different. So I enjoyed the cigar, and I thought it was pretty interesting. And at some point, I think that's something that may have what I call in the retail business legs, where people may want to try it just because it's different, right? But Africa does have cultivation of cigar tobacco. A lot of people don't realize that, and typically it's the old school way too, where we small family farms pull in their tobacco and then they sell it. But in America, when we talk about legislative things, we don't have legislative problems with farming. The latest legislative thing that's got me concerned is this push for the outright banning of tobacco. We've had a bill introduced in California where it makes it, if you're born after a certain date, you'll never be able to buy tobacco, period, ever. And New York just talked about introducing one too. And the way this works is the liberal political circles will start, they call it a straw man, where they start putting this out, knowing it's not going to pass. But if you keep throwing it into legislation every year, after 10 years, it doesn't sound like a crazy idea anymore, because they've already had it out there for 10 years. And then eventually it can pass, which is very dangerous for our industry. First off, I think it's crazy, because the same people that push for the outright tobacco ban are pushing for legalization of drugs, hardcore drugs. And so it's like, okay, smoking a cigar is bad, but heroin is good. I don't know what kind of world we live in where we're saying that. This is crazy. I'm a father. I got kids. I don't want my kids even smoking dope. I'd love to smoke cigars with my kids when they turn 18. I cherish that moment, right? But I don't know how many dads are saying I cherish that moment where I can roll up a big joint with my son. Maybe some people do. That's not me though. But the fact that we have politicians that are literally introducing bills to make tobacco illegal number one, it's bad for business. Number two, we've been down this road before. All it does is cause good people to become criminals. People that are in the cigar industry or like to smoke a cigar or whatever, we're turning them in. It's prohibition, and we've had it with alcohol, and we're criminalizing good people. So to me, that's the biggest issue that I'm seeing. It's just that, where does this stop? And that's the end all when you just literally ban it. So of course, we're going to have to spend our resources on educating people. But I at the end of the day, almost everybody gets it. I don't care if you smoke cigars or not. When you tell them this argument, hey, we're going to ban cigars but make heroin legal, I don't know of anybody that really says, hey, that sounds like a great idea. So anyway, so in the end, I think we'll still win, but at the same time, the only way we lose to this kind of stuff is if we sit around and do nothing. And 90% of the battle is just showing up, because a lot of these people that push this stuff they're totally ignorant to what we do, right? And as soon as somebody gives them some pushback, which they're not used to getting, by the way, you'll be surprised how some people fold under political discourse, where you're just arguing why their bill is bad and why this shouldn't happen. And you can beat it because your arguments are better. There's no way somebody's going to argue that cigars should be illegal. If you had somebody that was telling you why they should be legal. So anyway, those are the biggest challenges.
On that front, just a quick one then, do you feel, if you go back to the history books and you look at prohibition and how that failed, horribly, catastrophically failed, look at where we are now, and you look at marijuana and where weed was a few decades ago, you had the war on drugs, and now it's legalized in most states. Do you feel like we're going through that stage where it's kind of getting the message out there, fighting this battle, as it were, getting the resources, manning, getting resources behind it, and we'll be okay again? Or do you think this is a much harder battle to actually come out on the right side of in the 10, 15, 20 years time?
The reason it's a much harder battle is because the money that's behind the push to make tobacco illegal, because of the way something called the master settlement and the way these cigar taxes and cigarette taxes are, a very large portion of that money is used to fund Tobacco Free Kids, which is a very active political organization that is pushing for the ban of tobacco, right? So literally your opponent is being funded by the industry that they're trying to put out of business. Now, historically, that's never happened. Prohibition was not, the political movement for prohibition was not financed by the sale of alcohol.
Yep.
And the same thing with the prohibition or war on drugs was not financed by the cartels. So this is the one scenario where our political opponents are actually funded by our industry. So that's why it's more challenging. And there's a lot of money when it comes to, taxes collected on tobacco.
True.
So that's why it's more challenging.
Gotcha. Final question, and maybe coming back onto more of a positive note. I know these challenges are going to be there, and we're going to be fighting them for a while. I just wanted to understand from your take, being as in love you are with sort of the growing side of things, and really getting your hands dirty, as it were. Is there a technique? Is there something that you've noticed maybe in other countries, or something that you're doing that you wish others would sort of develop and actually, add to their repertoire of how they grow the tobacco leaves? Something that you want more growers to sort of get involved with or pick up?
No, I mean, I like the way each country has some. We need each country to have its own culture and character, because that's what makes each tobacco special and different. So I think it's best that every tobacco, the more identifiable each country's tobacco is, the better. Because and that's when we started growing Florida Sun-Grown, it's like I didn't want it to taste like any other tobacco, because if it did, I felt we failed. Because then why blend it in a cigar if you can't tell it's there? So no, I like that. Each farmer needs to have different. The best analogy I can give is that it's like having 3 different chefs in 3 different restaurants with the exact same food supplier bringing in their food. You don't want them to all produce the same. We want each chef to put their own flair on it, their own difference, what makes this dish special, and their own personality to shine through. And we see that not just with the farms, but actually when it comes to blending tobacco. Like when we send our FSG tobaccos in at least five different factories, right? And so when they blend a cigar, I stand back because I want that chef to shine through. I want his skills and his flavor profile to be on that cigar, because that's what makes it different. And so, yeah, I think the diversity and the difference of all the different farmers and tobacco is a good thing.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the time and answering my questions, Jeff. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Great question, Mace, and Jeff, many thanks for the detailed response. Brief little input. You were probably thinking or speaking about Bongani cigars out of Mozambique.
Yes.
We had Kamal Mukaiber on the show. I think it was already 2 years back or so, but it's Bongani cigars in Mozambique. A very interesting operation indeed.
It was, but you know what the problem is with that? The name is hard to remember. So that, because I'm trying to remember, and I couldn't remember it, but I remember where the country was. I remember what the tobacco was. So yeah, I think that I would love to see that tobacco used in other cigars, because once again, it's another just a different spin on another resource for a great, because the cigar was good. I was really surprised if it is all Mozambique tobacco, it was really good. I enjoyed it.
And also a quick follow-up on what Mace just said. I think it was in 2016 or 2017 when the cigar and tobacco culture in Honduras was declared an intangible cultural heritage. Do you think that kind of initiative could possibly have legs and help if more manufacturing or growing countries and areas would possibly venture into that direction and try to protect that cultural heritage, and thus strongly communicate to the outside world, this is important, this is something that has been there for centuries, let's protect it?
So actually what you brought up, I didn't know they were doing that. That's critical that they do that, and I'll tell you why. Because this isn't just a local war on tobacco, it's a global initiative. So the World Health Organization is the one that drives it. And I remember when Honduras passed a very crazy smoking ban where you couldn't even smoke a cigar in someone's house. It was illegal, right? And I'm like, come on, man. Honduras, it's almost like an anything goes type of country, right? But yet you're going to say it's illegal to smoke a cigar in your own home, right? And so, but that was a World Health Organization issue. What they do is they go to these countries and say, hey, listen, I remember what happened in the Dominican Republic too. You could no longer smoke outside at the hotel there in Santiago, but it's because the WHO goes to those developing countries and say, hey, in order for you to get your money from us, we need you to do this, which means have a very anti-tobacco stance, right? Now, the way you can defend that is just what you said, with you apply the culture and heritage side of it, because WHO type of people are sensitive to culture and heritage. So if you're saying you're oppressing a certain culture and heritage, they're generally going to back off because they don't want to be viewed as oppressors, right? So you have to figure out the mindset of your enemy, in this case, WHO, that wants to make tobacco illegal. But it's like, listen, this is part of our culture, it's part of our heritage, and we want our freedom to be able to cultivate it, grow it, and enjoy it. So I think that's a brilliant move by those countries to do that. I didn't know they were doing it. I think it's brilliant.
Maybe something to look into for certain parts of the US where tobacco growing has been historically documented and noted.
Well, the reason we don't have, let me explain this too. World Health Organization uses their money to influence developing countries. They don't have America's funds a lot of that too. So they don't have the let's say strength to apply their viewpoints on America, because they're not holding the big check, waving it in front of us saying, hey, America, we're going to give you this big check if you do this. When you're a developing country and you need money for a hospital or for whatever, you will do almost anything they tell you so you get that check every year. So that's why WHO doesn't have an effect here. However, what we have to do is battle with, the FDA and the anti-tobacco the professional anti-tobacco associations like Tobacco Free Kids, that's where we have to fight them.
And I think that intangible cultural heritage designation actually comes from the UNESCO, right? So that's probably something to look into. I mean, I always found it curious how Honduras got that tick mark and that kind of certification or gratification, and I was curious if other growing areas or manufacturing countries could possibly look into that as well.
They should.
Macy, good to have you with us. Good to see you enjoying a cigar. Chime in.
You can hear me and see me. Is that right?
We can.
Clear.
Sorry, I thought my phone could only go to coronacigar.com and place orders. And I try to hide from my wife. I didn't know it could do other. I'm not hiding porn, so I'm hiding your website, sir, for my wife.
Well, get her a jar.
Off. I can't afford. That's when I know it's a holiday. I get a Corona email that makes me happy. Like, oh, it's truly a holiday. If you're not having a sale, it's not a holiday, Jeff. It's a get together. I don't know what it is.
Thank you.
First of all, let me say, and I love your catalog. I just turned 38. Thank you for the email, Reinhardt. Sorry, my grandfather passed that same day. It's been anyway, so sorry I didn't get back. But I'm 38, been smoking a while, and a lot of those years have been receiving the Corona catalog. And I just want to say I've actually learned a lot about cigars. I called it Nudie Magazine Day when I would get it every month. I loved it in law school. Some of your bundle deals in law school got me through it. And some of the mix and matches in the back. So I really love your business, and it's just awesome to talk to you after having spent so much. Man, those bundles did get me through a lot, and they were good. I'm telling you, people don't count out the Corona value bundles. Surprisingly good. Couple of more quick comments. Sorry, since I can't. And Brian, you gave me the shout out. I bought this book the other day in Phoenix. I was out there. I don't know if this is good. It looked great. I'm trying to teach myself and my kid chess notation. So anyway, quick little since he gave me one. But multiple affinities. I actually dream. I'm a lawyer who you hit the nail on the head on so many things. I've heard your interview. I'm a political libertarian. You call yourself conservative. I consider you more libertarian. Because I think you're a true freedom lover, a true capitalist. I appreciate that. I want to thank you for all your lobbying efforts. Remind everyone, get your comments in on the FDA manufacturing rules in opposition. I'm going to be saying that every week. I'll post a link. But Jeff, you really have walked the walk on that. And that actually reminds me, before I get into my technical question, my opinion is I want to be, I'm married to Colombian. My dream is, like you talked about Mozambique. I think you're talking about Malawi. I've actually heard a lot of cigarette tobacco. But anyway, my dream is Colombian tobacco. And that's what I want. I want to make money and just do exactly that. You're really an inspiration to me. I actually name drop. I talked with you about talked to you with Eric Newman at Puro Sabor. And let me tell you, that family is amazing. Eric Newman took me to the side, demanded gave me, he wanted and he's like, just, you're a consumer. I want to pick your brain. I want to learn from you. And one of the points I emphasized was online's your friend, and Corona's a great retailer. He agreed there. And so Eric Newman called me the most passionate cigar smoker in the world. But I'll say this, that family is something special. I'd really like to meet his son, who's the lawyer who's involved in this FDA stuff, who gave some great comments with the PCA at a session they had on April 12th. I think that you can get that on YouTube. You should all watch that. But anyway, so all this comes to the problem with Colombian tobacco, and I'm sorry, bouncing all over, is they can't grow wrapper. And this is a segue into a question I have for you, because the American by J.C. Newman, great cigar, tremendous, my favorite cigar I've had using your tobacco. That uses FSG on the wrapper. And the issue I'm having with my Colombian sources is no one can grow the wrapper down there. They haven't yet. If they say they do, it's really from Ecuador and they're lying. So what techniques are you using in FSG that allow, I guess, I don't know, are you growing some under shade? Are you just grading out some wrapper? And if so, like what percentage are you getting a yield of what you consider wrapper? So can you please start going to the weeds on your cultivation techniques, what you're doing to try to grow wrapper grade tobacco, and just talk about that area and what's worked for you in that. Thank you.
So great, great questions. So one of the most important things, lessons that Eduardo Fernandez taught me when I first started, he goes, Jeff, when you're growing tobacco, you always try to grow your entire crop as a wrapper, because if you don't try to grow wrapper, you're never going to get it, number one. But if you're growing a wrapper crop, you'll be doing great if you get 30% wrapper in the end, because a leaf of tobacco, in order for it to grade as wrapper, number one, and this is how we do it, it starts in the field. So number one, we got to make sure there's no holes in the leaf, which are going to be caused by several things. Bugs, number one, bugs will eat holes in your leaves. Number two, you can get wind damage from a bad storm. Three is from humans, the people that are working in the rows, that you got to be careful and you don't break the leaves as you're walking down the rows. And when you harvest the tobacco, you're very careful. You pick one leaf at a time, and the handling of it is critical. You got to handle it as if you're handling something very breakable and fragile. So, if you don't have your farm operation with their mind on wrapper, you're never going to get it, because it's a whole different way of handling things. If you ever watch this is the reason we don't use like any harvest crews. If you ever watch guys at like a harvest crew, whether they're harvesting lettuce or watermelons or whatever, these crews get in there and they work fast. They pick and they throw and they toss and they pack. If you brought a harvest crew like that into a field of tobacco, they'll ruin every leaf. You can't work cigar tobacco like that. That's why cigar tobacco is expensive. It's meticulous, one by one, leaf by leaf. Care from in this process I'm talking about is not only in the field, but every step as you're sewing it, as you're handing the sticks to the next guy, as they hang it in the barn, as we bring it back down, as we take it and put it inside the cigar in the cartons. You have to handle it like it's made of a thin porcelain, like it's going to break. So again, number one, mentality on the farm, we're growing wrapper. Now, even with all that, even with picking leaves that are perfect, if they got holes in it, we're not picking them. All right. But even with that, the highest we've ever netted was 40% wrapper, which is an incredible amount. That's because that tobacco, once it leaves our farm, when it gets into the J.C. Newman factory in Nicaragua, which is where it's processed, they have to unpack all that, right? So every single time somebody's grabbing those leaves, they can put their finger through it, right? And then once it's unpacked, then they have to sort it. And then they sort it by thickness. So again, everybody touches it, you can break leaves. Then when you put it in the pilon, just the natural fermentation process is going to break some leaves as well, and stain them too. Remember, breakage is one thing, staining is another. And then after that, every single time that it's deveined and everything else, you're going to break leaves. So breakage is number one. But number two, when you talked about like in Colombia, the tobacco barn is critical on growing wrapper. Like if you went in the Dominican Republic, you'll see the reason they say that you can never grow wrapper there is because they didn't do it. You can grow wrapper in the Dominican Republic. You can't use that open barn and old school technology. Not even old school. It's just that their barns were just like little lean-tos. They were open on the sides. You can't grow wrapper like that because it's gonna get, the sides of your barn have to be enclosed. It has to be in a controlled environment. So cigar wrapper, you can grow it in Colombia. I guarantee it. It's just a matter of how the farm has to be geared towards number one. And remember, a farmer can't do that because he's doing commodity prices. I can tell you how it does. You're going to have to become Mr. Douglas, which a friend of mine, Cigar Dave, used to always call me Mr. Douglas. And I never knew why until I watched the show. And then I got it, So you are Mr.
Thank you,
Douglas.
but that is you get it, sir.
Yeah.
You just tickled me with that reference.
Yeah. And so the thing is, believe it or not, more and more people, because I see it where our farms are, more and more people are becoming Mr. Douglas. Now, the people don't know what Mr. Douglas is. It was a show called Green Acres. And what it was about this rich guy lived in Manhattan. And he had a wife that was, loved all the finer things in life and went shopping and, diamonds and all this other stuff, loved the fancy life. And he's like, you know what? I've had it with the city life. I'm going to buy a farm. And he was a gentleman farmer. It was a comedy, though, because he was always getting ripped off and trying to learn things. But anyway, believe it or not, a lot of my neighbors, the guy that owned the blueberry farm next to where one of my ranches is, he's a lawyer. These are, and the guy that behind me, another place, he's a software guy. You'll be surprised how many guys that are in, law or computers, whatever, they just get to a point in their life where like, listen, man, I want to get out of this concrete jungle. I want to go be a farmer, or I want to live on a farm. And so it's much more common than you think. And one of the good things is like sometimes you'll go to these U-pick farms and you're like, man, this place is fancy. Well, that's because the guy that owns it is putting more money into it than he may even be making. That's because he wants his place to look nice. And so anyway, so we need these gentleman farmers, because sometimes they may be the only guys that keep agriculture alive in certain areas because it can be so expensive. So I hope I answered your question. I understand your passion between, being a lawyer and having to, listen, lawyers have to read all the time too. And it's a good thing. I say all the time, listen, we have a cigar store in downtown Orlando, right across from City Hall. So I am understand the urban environment. And for me, my yin and yang is to get out there and get dirty on the farm. And so it's just, it's what causes a balance in our life. So what you're talking about, believe it or not, there's a lot more people that feel that way than people realize.
Thank you. That was an amazing. And your honey, I'm a honey connoisseur, is some of the best honey I've ever had from all of it. It really is. If y'all do nothing else, buy the damn honey. It's, I think, the best product he's got.
Let me explain the honey real quick. So the honey, the reason why it is tobacco honey. So when we're done with a crop, the tobacco plants throw out flowers like crazy because they're trying to reproduce their themselves, because they know they've been stripped of their leaves. And by then, when you're done, it needs to produce seeds so life can continue. So at that point, when we're done with harvest, you've got all those flowers, the bees go crazy. And there's a lot of nectar in a honey and a tobacco flower. And that nectar is what produces some of the sweetest, best honey around. And we're the only people I know of that have tobacco honey, because again, there's no cigar tobacco farms around. But it is, we discovered that by accident. My neighbor has an aviary, and one year when we were done, the field was too wet for us to get in there, cut it down. And he goes, Jeff, man, my bees are making honey like 4 times more than they normally would. And the honey's incredible. He goes, can you please let your tobacco plants go to flower when it's done? I said, we can do that. I said, what do you do with the honey? He goes, I sell it on Facebook Marketplace, whatever. I said, what do you sell it for? So he told me the price. I said, I'll buy it all, and we'll just sell it. We'll sell it in the stores. And so that's what we did. So enjoy your honey.
That's an incredible story as well. I love that part, Jeff. Now, before we wrap things up, I would love to briefly touch on the retail side of things with you as well. How do you currently see the challenges, the chances, what's happening in cigar retail as a consequence of all the evolutions during the COVID pandemic? We all know that there were these tremendous ups and downs in the beginning. Everything was kind of everybody was uncertain about what's going to happen. There was a bit of a dip, and then we came out super strong, and cigar sales have been on the rise ever since. How do you look at all of that as a retailer, and where do you think the industry is truly at when it comes to the state of the retail side of things?
So I think the retail is strong. Now, let me explain something that's interesting. So you mentioned Chat GPT earlier and AI and stuff. We have a cultural shift towards gaming and meta with those head things and all that other stuff. And as more of society is being pushed towards isolationism and false reality. I always look at things as things are being steered here. I look the other direction, because what happens is human nature is still, we want to be around each other. We want human interaction. No matter what the technological people are pushing us towards, there's going to be a human resistance to it. And so we saw that during COVID. The more people were locked down, the more they wanted to get together and have a cigar. We had to navigate a lot of rules during COVID with the shutdowns and what was legal, what was not. I'll never forget this. We were allowed to sell cigars and sell alcohol, right? But you couldn't smoke them in the shop. This was in the beginning. You couldn't have them in the shop. Later, we went to go containers, and that was okay. But during that 2 weeks to flatten the curve thing, that ended up being 2 years in some places. But we had our customers would still come in, get cigars, and they would literally walk out back behind the store. I'm talking where the dumpsters are located, okay? And in the empty parking lot, they bring out their own chairs and they would sit and they would smoke cigars and still talk to each other, right? Now, I'm just saying, there's human resistance to people. As much as we stare at our iPhones and everything else, people still like being around other people and having it's needed. We are social creatures. We're not meant to be isolated. That's why if you're a prisoner, you put them in solitary confinement. It's one of the worst punishments you can do. People want to be around people and talk about whatever, the game or the news or whatever. They just want to talk. So the future for me on the cigar lounge, cigar bar, cigars in general, I'm bullish on it, meaning that I believe that this is always going to be very good. No matter how much technology goes, we still have the human nature wants us to enjoy a cigar around others. If you notice, a lot of people don't smoke cigar unless they're around others, by the way. It's a social gathering that by a lot of people will smoke a cigar. So yeah, I think it's the more that we're pushed towards the technology towards that other stuff, there are people that are like, man, I'm ready to get out of the house. I'm tired of that. I want to go smoke a cigar, meet my friends at the store. So anyway, our stores are busy. It's hard to find a seat in our places. And that's a good thing. It's a good, and I'm not even for business. I'm saying for society, it's a good thing. When we get people that are talking to each other, and we've got, the cigar culture is as diverse as it gets, and so, diversity breeds good ideas and good discussion. So anyway, I'm happy about what's the cigar culture, and I think as long as it's legal, I feel like the cigar lounge bar concept is going to do just fine.
How do you currently look at the market? I mean, you work all across the board, and Corona has something to offer for everybody, every budget, every palate. But you have a particular affinity for the luxury cigar segment as well. And we've certainly seen that more and more manufacturers have invested heavily in expanding their portfolio, particularly in the premium and luxury segment. And there's other brands that it just went into that segment right away. And besides, cigar prices are on the rise in general, not just because of what's happening to the whole Habanos portfolio and with everything that Cuba is currently doing. How do you look at that market segmentation and what people are looking for? Because whilst the luxury segment is booming like never before and it's incredibly strong, a lot of people are struggling on the other hand. And so at least the way I perceive it is that gap is widening dramatically, and people are either looking for the budget option or they're in a position where they can afford the uber luxury and then go heavily after that stuff. What's your observation?
So we've always had a wide variety of price on cigars, just like we're talking about the bundles and everything. We've had a brand called El Cheapo forever. We actually have about 10 different bundle lines, and we're talking about cigars are like $1 a piece, right? Some of them are maybe up to $2 per cigar, depending on the size. But then again, we're probably the #1 retailer in the world when it comes to expensive cigars. those Oro Blancos. I know no one sold more than Corona Cigar. Those Oro Blancos and the unicorns from Steve Saka, any of these super high-end cigars. There's a reason we do very well with them, is because if you only have one time, once a week, or, you know, let's say you smoke one cigar once a week, that means 52 times in a year. There might be 2 times in that year where you want something super special. And that's why you'll buy that super premium cigar. So we do well with them because time is the most precious commodity for some of our clients. On the other hand, I believe we're going to see some of these, the price for some of the luxury cigars. Now, I'm not talking about the ones that are $100 and $600 a stick. I'm not talking about that. Those are always there. But with this Habanos thing, with the supply going to China and there being a global shortage of Habanos, that's also putting pressure on the Nicaraguan, Dominican, Honduran suppliers, right? And as Habanos is pushing their prices higher, where a box of Cohibas can be, $900, all of a sudden a $400 box of cigars that used to look expensive doesn't look quite as expensive anymore. So Habanos is driving that price category, let's say, for premium cigars. But there will always be the inexpensive bundle cigar that's there. And that's the beauty about cigars, is that the cost of admission, when I say cost of admission to get into this game, let's call it, right? We have some cigars that cost you $2 and you can sit there and be in the same arena where everybody else, there is no set price of cigar you got to buy to have a seat at Corona Cigar. You follow me? So that's why I say cost of admission to enjoy the cigar lifestyle is actually low. It really is. It's what you choose to smoke, though. Most of our customers like to smoke the super premium and better cigars. I mean, Davidoff, Padron Anniversary, Atabey, Byron. These are great cigars, right? And there is a difference between a $2 bundle cigar and a $38 Atabey or a Padron Anniversary. They are not the same product. So there is a I don't want to say perceived value. There is, people realize when you spend that kind of money, they expect more from that cigar, as they should. And so there is a difference in these cigars. But at the same time, if you can't afford a Padron Anniversary, you can go buy a bundle of El Cheapos or El Repos or any of our Corona Segundos and still smoke the cigar and be right next to the guy that's smoking he might be smoking a Padron 50th, right? That's an expensive cigar, but that's the beauty of the cigar lifestyle.
Beautifully said. How do you feel about that segment of the market where a lot of the well-established brands, or even some of the newer quote-unquote boutique brands, have tried to go more heavily into the 20 plus range of cigars, where you feel like it's probably something that you would expect from their portfolio, but they're now putting a premium onto it in terms of the price. But I feel there's a certain risk that the consumer might be worried that there's a gap opening up between the actual value of the cigar and what they now have to pay for it, or their expectations are higher because suddenly they're paying $25 for a cigar, where it's probably not in the super luxury category just by the raw materials, the packaging, the way it's presented, and the story behind it, but probably because they can do it and they can put that price tag on it. So my question, I guess, is twofold. A, do you see a certain tendency amongst the manufacturing group to venture into that 20 plus range simply because the consumer is more adapted now to paying such a premium for a cigar, and they feel like, well, we can do it? And then also, do you see that consumers are becoming more wary about what do I get in terms of value for money if I'm paying 20 plus for a cigar?
So if they're paying 20 plus for a cigar, they have higher expectations and they should be more demanding. Here's the part where I think people don't understand is that if you don't have a brand that typically, let's say you have a brand that's a $5, $6, $7 brand, and you try to create one that's a $25 cigar, I don't think anybody's going to run to go buy your cigar. You just can't call a cigar luxury and throw an expensive price tag on it. It goes against human nature. Let me explain.
Exactly.
If we have an economy car, let's say an entry level economy car, and then that economy car brand decides to put a fancy badge on the front, on the hood, and on the trunk, and then decide to start competing against luxury brands, the consumer's still not going to buy it. Okay, so it's not just, you just don't crack into that category by having a high price and saying, hey, it's my super premium cigar. I say this all the time. Who are the people that have kind of owned that space of luxury, right? It's always been Padron Anniversary, Davidoff, Opus X, now Atabey and Byron, Grey Cliff. These are the cigars that have always been in that price category. And so if you take some other brand that's normally selling for $5 and try to put it in that price category, do you really think the customer's going to pick that up instead of the Davidoff that he knows and trusts and has been a luxury brand for, how many years? Or that he's going to pick up that brand versus the Padron Anniversary? Or, it's just not that easy. And especially when it comes to expensive stuff, people tend to buy the ones that there's more to the luxury than just putting a price on it. Like the one new brand that's going to come in, luxury brand, is the El Septimo. Now, El Septimo is a great cigar, but also the luxury perceived value of it with the packaging and the way the cigar is positioned. When the Los Angeles Rams won the Super Bowl, they're smoking El Septimos, right? They're not smoking a $3 cigar, you know what I'm saying? So there's a lot of things that go into making a luxury brand and getting the consumer to actually buy it. So while a lot of guys may want to just throw a price on it, I can tell you right now as a retailer, it doesn't mean they're going to sell. And it's not that easy to get a guy to switch up from a trusted premium brand to a no-name cigar with the same price on it.
Excellent point. Many thanks for your perspective on that. I find it very interesting, and it's all those market dynamics are truly interesting to follow and see where the industry is sort of headed towards. And I feel that the past 2-3 years have truly kind of accelerated in that direction. Obviously, as a consequence of what happened during COVID, and challenges with supply and demand, and the cigar sales still being on a very constant uphill trajectory. So it's just interesting to see that, and I was very curious to hear your thoughts. Pardon, please.
So the thing about COVID, though, the reason why the sales went up a lot during COVID is because people had the opportunity to smoke cigars. They were home, so the opportunity was there for people to buy more. The industry this year is leveling out, and there are economic factors going on right now. I don't know about outside America, but right now there is financial pressure. Where we are in a recession, numbers have been going down. So, but either way, cigars, people, it's not as much of someone's, let's call it their take-home pay. If they decide to spend, $10 on a cigar once a week, in reality, it's a very inexpensive luxury that they're treating themselves to. So even when people don't have a job, they'll tend to still have a cigar just to, the quality of life, So So it's not one of those luxuries that you may not take the family on a vacation, but you can spend $10 on a cigar.
Amen. Jeff, it's been such a tremendous pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you so much for spending so much time with us and sharing all these wonderful insights and your experience and knowledge. Before we go, I would love to leave you with one final question and just maybe a humble wish or a thought as to what can we all do better as an industry, but also, especially since we have so many people joining us that are cigar enthusiasts and consumers, what do you think we can all do as a cigar community to strengthen that culture and strengthen our family and community to move forward as a strong industry with a positive future?
Introduce people to cigars. I do it all the time. I'm serious. Yeah. So many times I'm like, hey man, I use cigars as a lot of times as a thank you to somebody. I don't care whether it's somebody that just, might have been fixing the roof or something like that. Hey guys, you want some cigars? And then it's always like, have you ever had one? And then I always take the time to explain to them, you don't smoke a cigar like a cigarette. You don't inhale this thing. If you inhale it, you're going to get sick. You just puff on it, whatever. But, a lot of times smoking a cigar is intimidating for people, especially if they've never done it. And, just teach them and spend the time with them and share the knowledge of how to enjoy a cigar. You'd be surprised how many times, as long as they had somebody guide them correctly. When I say guide them correctly, is you don't give somebody who's never had a cigar before a strong cigar, because if he feels sick, he's never going to smoke another one. And then, if he doesn't taught how to light it right and, don't inhale type of thing. And then if it's done, how many times people smoke their first cigar and they smoke half of it and they want to put it in a bag and smoke it the next day. And I'm like, guys, that doesn't work. It's going to taste terrible tomorrow. Just throw it out. You start over. But just little things like that, sharing the knowledge, sharing the camaraderie, because the camaraderie is one of the bigger things besides the cigars. I've never seen anybody come into a place like Corona Cigar and enjoy being around people smoking cigars saying, hey, I didn't really like that. Most times it's always like, wow, that was really cool experience. I didn't know we had places anymore. We could literally gather and start talking and making new friends. And that lifestyle is a healthy lifestyle for all of us to build those bonds with other people. And it's, I think it's more of a humanity thing. And that's why, man, we talk about history. That's why the Indian chiefs were smoking pipes and it was ceremonial, and it was the peace pipe. They called it a peace pipe for a reason. They weren't smoking, cigar tobacco to start a war. They were doing it to bond and break bread and peace. So anyway, maybe we could have a little more of that around the world, right?
Jeff, I couldn't think of a better way and better remark to end the show on. Again, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to have you with us. And I very much hope to see you in July in Vegas, and maybe thereafter on a little US tour when I'll be traveling the US, so I can come and see you in Orlando or Tampa or wherever it might be. I'd love to come and spend some time with you there. So,
all right, you got an open invitation. I'll see you in Las Vegas.
I can't wait. Thanks for everything, Jeff. Be very well. Our blessings to you and the family. All the best with the difficulties and the aftermaths of the hailstorm. And I know you'll only come back stronger. And I can't wait to see the pictures of the new crop. So I wish you nothing but tremendous success for everything that you do. And many thanks again for joining us at the Light 'em Up Lounge.
All right, thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye, everybody. Light 'em up. Cheers.
Thank you very much.